Hey guys, tonight we descend into a court so thoroughly unhinged by royal insomnia, you'll be lucky to escape with your wits intact, assuming you had any to begin with. The corridors reek faintly of lavender and candle wax. The air is thick with whispered lullabies, and somewhere behind velvet drapes, a king wide-eyed from 6 straight days of sleeplessness is brooding about curtains that move just a little too suspiciously. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, tell me your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little kingdom reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awaken to the subtle sound of bells. Not church bells, but those delicate silver ones nobles wear on their ankles to announce their presence while somehow also pretending to be silent. The chill in the stone beneath you suggests dawn, though no one in the castle dares speak of morning or evening anymore. Time is a sore subject here. You've been summoned, again. Something about curtains. As you stumble down the corridor, dodging a sleepwalking guard mumbling feather quota, the court begins to stir in its usual haze of dread and draft. You reach the king's private audience chamber, or as it's been renamed this week, the Unrest Pavilion. His Majesty sits slumped sideways on a throne padded with hay. His eyes are bloodshot, his crown askew. The man hasn't blinked in 20 minutes. You bow low as tradition demands. Or maybe that's just gravity doing its job after 3 nights on straw pallets. The king gestures dramatically toward the crimson curtains behind him. They sway slightly, not due to wind, but because one of the pages is manually fanning them on orders. They whisper, the king croaks, they plot. You nod solemnly, obviously. The obsession began 3 nights ago, after the court herbalist, who, fun fact, has been exiled to the bell tower for excessive yawning, gave the king a draught of poppy milk and insisted he dream of whispering red veils. Unfortunately, he did. Now all red curtains are under suspicion. You're tasked with overseeing their interrogation. Yes, interrogation. The last footman who suggested they might just be fabric now tends to goats near the moat. You're given a scroll of permissible curtain behaviors and a whisper meter, which looks suspiciously like a tin cup with a string. The curtains are uncooperative. You try stroking them, murmuring affirmations, even offering chamomile tea. Nothing. The king watches through a peephole, scribbling in his curtain surveillance log. He later accuses one panel of blinking. The fabric is removed, placed in chains, and paraded through the great hall, a warning to the others. Now, this might sound absurd, but the idea of rulers behaving erratically from lack of sleep isn't new. Historians agree that sleep deprivation has played a role in the collapse of empires and the destabilization of entire courts. King Charles VI of France once believed he was made of glass and refused to let people touch him for fear he'd shatter. While not explicitly tied to sleep, scholars suspect that the man's erratic nighttime rituals and obsessive candle counting didn't help his grasp on reality. In our royal scenario, however, it's not just the king who's unraveling. The court itself has adopted his paranoia. There's a new law posted by the stables, Article 7, subsection M. All furnishings capable of folding, swaying, or absorbing dreams shall report to the grand seamstress, for questioning. The Grand Seamstress died 4 years ago. Her ghost is reportedly overworked. You, on the other hand, have been promoted to assistant curtain liaison. Your job description includes 1. Listening for treasonous rustling, 2. Comforting suspicious drapery, and 3. Filing paperwork in triplicate. The ink runs out halfway through Form B13T, Declaration of Fabric Innocence, so you just draw a sleepy sheep and hope for the best. And just when you think it can't get worse, you hear the king's latest decree. All court members must now sleep with their eyes open, or not at all. He believes that sleep is a form of betrayal, an act of personal abandonment. If I can't sleep, he bellows over breakfast broth, then none of you shall drift either. Historians still argue whether Louis XV of France truly believed that falling asleep in the presence of a superior was treasonous. But palace etiquette books from Versailles strongly hint that dozing off, even briefly, during a royal performance or address, was grounds for social annihilation. Back in the court of our sleep-deprived monarch, social annihilation now involves being reassigned to the blanket mines, which may or may not be a metaphor. You overhear conflicting reports. One says they spin straw into sleep-inducing flannel. Another claims it's just a cold cellar full of angry badgers. Of course, there are whisperings, real ones, not curtain-induced, that the king's condition may be the result of an ancient curse. Something about a stolen pillow from a traveling oracle or a forgotten lullaby sung backwards during his christening. You're not sure. The only thing you know for certain is that the air in the castle now smells permanently of burnt lavender. The worst part? You're starting to lose track of how long you've been awake. Was it yesterday that the chandeliers were singing? Or was that last week? Did you dream the cake that bit you? Or was that Lord Bartholomew's wig again? The walls breathe at night now. Or maybe they always did. You try not to look directly at the fireplace. It looks back. You finally return to your quarters. Well, your assigned hay pile behind the tapestry of The Napping Duke. You lie down and close your eyes for just a moment. The last thing you hear is the soft rustle of curtains from the next room, and someone whispering your name. You awaken to a hand shaking your shoulder. Not gently, it's the night watcher, and he's glaring at the small candle flickering beside you with the kind of fury normally reserved for open rebellion, or, in this castle, someone who sneezes too enthusiastically. It's after midnight, he hisses, then points dramatically at the taper. Contraband. You blink blearily at him, not entirely sure if you're awake or still in one of those dreams where the tapestries sing Gregorian lullabies. But no, this is real. Candlelight after midnight is now illegal. You should have remembered the decree. It was shouted by a herald wearing one slipper and a colander on his head just last night during supper. Or was it breakfast? Time, as we've established, has left the building. Apparently, the king has decided that artificial light after the 12th toll of the bell confuses the spirits of rest. And more importantly, it makes him jealous. Since he can't sleep, no one else should be able to read, write, or whisper by cozy, flickering flame. The night watcher confiscates your candle, then your matches, then suspiciously eyes your earwax, just in case. This isn't the first time candlelight has been policed in a royal court. King Gustav III of Sweden once banned all forms of theatrical lighting during his more paranoid stretches, convinced the flickering encouraged revolution. Historians still argue whether the famed Opera House blackout of 1789 was a genuine accident or a calculated attempt to drive dissenters mad with disorientation. Back in your current nightmare, the night watcher continues his rounds. You trail behind, forced into temporary duty as taper assistant third class. This involves following him with a bucket of wet sand, which you're to fling at any unauthorized flame, window reflection, or suspicious glow. You pass Lady Ethelwyn's chamber. She's weeping softly into a butter churn. Nothing to do with the candle ban, apparently just her way of decompressing. The night watcher inspects her room, sniffs the air like a particularly irritated weasel, and declares it too cozy. She is issued a notice of emotional infractions, and her pillow is confiscated. You move on to the library, where several members of the council are engaged in illicit shadow puppet storytelling using the glow from a still warm fireplace. The scene is dramatic. A goose-shaped hand accuses a walrus-shaped hand of theft. You're both enthralled and terrified. The night watcher explodes with rage, shouting unauthorized anthropomorphism, and lobs sand in all directions. The goose melts. The walrus surrenders. You try to breathe slowly, calmly, but you realize with a pang that even thinking about rest might now be criminal. Just yesterday, a kitchen boy was taken to the sighing staircase for humming a lullaby. No one's seen him since, though rumors say he's now an ornamental hat stand in the drawing room. Eventually, the night watcher decides your bucket is sleepily tilted and declares you compromised. You're reassigned again, this time as a torch snuff auditor. Your job is to count the exact moment each torch extinguishes itself, log the direction of the smoke curl, and note whether the flame seemed eager to leave. The forms are long, the ink is dry. Your will to live, flickering. The castle feels increasingly colder without candlelight. Blankets are rationed. The glowworms the king once kept in jars have unionized and gone on strike. One of them bit a baroness. The baroness bit back. No one won. The king, for his part, paces his chamber like a man pursued by invisible bedtime routines. He believes his insomnia is divine, a sign he's been chosen to witness the waking truth behind sleep's lies. His eyes are wide as he scrawls lines from ancient dream avoidance scrolls, most of which he wrote himself. One claims that pillows are witches flattened by remorse. Another describes snoring as a rebellion of the soul. You are summoned again, now to deliver the evening's report on illuminative noncompliance. You stand before His Majesty and read the crimes of the day: a maid who blinked too slowly, a pigeon that nested too cozily, and a candlestick that remained warm for 5 minutes after being extinguished. The king gnaws a quill thoughtfully, then demands the pigeon's immediate relocation and the candlestick's promotion to flame-retired elder. Historians often describe Peter the Great of Russia as a man obsessed with order, once even instituting beard taxes and regulating the width of trousers. But some argue his late-night inspections of nobles' bedchambers weren't just eccentric, possibly a sign of sleep deprivation-induced paranoia. Some even claim he banned yawning in court for fear it would invite death spirits. Here, under our own insomniac ruler, yawning isn't punished, it's monitored. Each yawn is cataloged, assigned a category: stifled, regretful, aggressive, whimsical, and reported to the yawn registry office. which is staffed entirely by narcoleptic monks who accidentally snore their seal of approval on most documents. The darkness now spreads like molasses through the hallways. The absence of light doesn't just make the castle shadowy, it changes the very mood. People speak softer. They move slower. One footman has taken to speaking exclusively in sighs, which the night watcher mistakes for a new dialect and insists be banned immediately. You, meanwhile, are beginning to lose your grip. You think you see a candle in your peripheral vision, but when you turn, it's just a lady-in-waiting holding a glowing onion. She insists the onion glows when it's near dishonesty. You ask what it says about the king. It immediately bursts into tears. Eventually, you sneak back to your pile of hay, now guarded by a weasel with a paper crown. You curl up tight, afraid to light even the smallest spark, lest the night watcher appear like a moth from your nightmares. You wonder if the shadows can be trusted. You wonder if they ever sleep. You wonder if you were ever awake. And somewhere deep in the castle, a candle burns where it shouldn't. You're woken, not by bells this time, nor the night watcher's talon-like knock, but by the scent of boiled lettuce, not gently steamed, not buttered or salted, just aggressively boiled into oblivion, the castle's newest invention, the sleep banquet. And you're expected to attend. At 3 o'clock in the morning, you stumble into the grand hall, which now bears a temporary sign, Somniferous Dining Experience, Attendance Mandatory. It's been decorated with dark velvet drapes and faint harp music, but not the kind that soothes. This is harp music played by someone who's clearly just as sleep-deprived as you are. Every few notes are slightly off, like the strings are hung over. You're seated next to a noble woman who seems to be made entirely of yawns and silk. She's mid-sentence when she falls asleep in her soup and has to be gently extracted with a ladle. This is considered a success. Tonight's menu has been specially designed by the royal slumber chef, who was once a perfectly normal cook until he too was banned from sleeping and took up the study of culinary sedation. Every dish tonight is meant to promote the illusion of rest. Course 1, boiled lettuce consommé with a drizzle of warm milk. It tastes like damp curtains. The king raises his goblet in a toast and commands everyone to chew very, very slowly. Course 2, lavender glazed oat paste, served on a pillow made of bread. It's the texture of mashed regret. Someone next to you groans softly. You can't tell if they're enjoying it or just giving up. Course 3 is simply called the drowse. It's unclear what it contains, though one courtier whispers that it involves crushed nightshade and a whisper from a nun. You eye the king suspiciously, but he's already nodding, not from sleep, but in grim approval. If we can't rest, he declares, we shall feast upon the illusion of rest. Sleep banquets, it turns out, are not unique to this kingdom. In ancient Rome, it was rumored that Emperor Elagabalus hosted midnight feasts where guests dined while blindfolded and surrounded by soporific incense. Historians still argue whether these banquets were acts of decadence or a genuine attempt to control dreams through ritual consumption. Either way, most guests reportedly left in states of either blissful stupor or mild poisoning. Back at your table, a footman named Cedric begins hallucinating that his spoon is talking back. He politely debates it for 10 minutes. You're jealous, at least he has conversation. Across the hall, the king's favorite musician performs a lullaby using only cheese graters and a damp tambourine. Everyone claps because they're too tired not to. Then comes the beverage course, boiled lettuce wine. You brace for the taste, and it does not disappoint in its horror. It's lukewarm, viscous, and oddly fizzy. A whisper circles the room that it's actually just footbath water from the monks of Hypnos, who steep their toes in valerian root. You gag. The king raises his goblet again. To staying awake, he says with a manic glint in his eye. Forever. Someone at the back mutters, "May sleep take me now?" and is swiftly removed by a sleep marshal, one of the new positions added to the court. They wear cloaks made of stitched-together eye masks and carry scepters shaped like alarm clocks. Their job is to ensure nobody accidentally drifts off, especially not in the presence of lettuce. You start to feel faint from the wine, or the lack of sleep, or maybe the harpist's latest attempt at Twinkle Twinkle, which now sounds like a threatening dirge. But just as your eyes begin to flutter shut, a plate clatters loudly in front of you. Final course, dream cake. It looks like a sponge, smells like baby powder, and has been dusted with what the steward assures you is harmless slumber spice. You don't ask what that is. You take a bite. Your mouth goes cold, your ears ring, and for one beautiful moment, you forget what your own name is. This apparently is the intended effect. The dream cake doesn't make you sleep. It just makes you feel like you might remember what sleep used to be. The king watches his court wobble like overcooked pudding. "We are triumphant," he whispers, more to himself than anyone else. "We have eaten the night." You are then expected to perform gratitude stretches, motions designed to aid digestion while also symbolically bowing to the spirit of sustained consciousness. You wave your arms, you nod vigorously, you bend in ways your knees protest, and then at long last you're dismissed. Back in the hallway, someone's thrown up a lavender-glazed oat pillow. It twitches once, then stops moving. As you creep toward your hay pile, which is now infested with beetles claiming squatters' rights, you reflect on the absurdity of what just happened. You're full, somehow exhausted and overstimulated, and you've got what you're fairly certain is sleep wine leaking from your left ear. Somewhere in the castle, a page is scribbling tonight's dinner review on parchment made from pressed moth wings. Ambiance bleak, menu confusing. Staff mostly conscious, stars TBD. You collapse onto your itchy straw, your stomach bubbling with regret and lettuce. Your mind looping the chorus of that cursed cheese grater lullaby. You wonder if this is it, if this is how people go mad, slowly, politely, and very well fed. And just as your breathing slows, just as you slip beneath the surface of reason, a trumpet sounds. The king wants seconds. You trudge into the throne room again, eyelids trembling like a newborn deer's knees, only to find 3 court jesters teetering on a narrow plank above a fountain of tepid rosewater. Each one wears bells, blindfolds, and the sort of grin that only comes from surviving 7 consecutive nights on nothing but fig paste and existential dread. A 4th jester stands below, juggling turnips and chanting backwards in Latin. You take your seat on a velvet stool that used to be someone's uncle, long story, and brace yourself for another royal entertainment, one of the king's infamous sleepless contests. The premise tonight, sword fight while blindfolded, recite Virgil backwards, and balance a boiled egg on the tip of your shoe, all while staying awake. The last jester who dozed off mid-duel was sentenced to a week in the punishment hammock, which swings too slowly to ever let you nap. The contest begins with a clang of tin cymbals and a cloud of chamomile smoke. The jesters stagger forward like babies learning to dance. One swipes wildly and misses by several miles, slicing clean through a pie left over from the sleep banquet. The pie seems grateful. Another begins muttering backward Latin. Snora evobasu, tempura. You think he's quoting "Time flies over us," but it's hard to tell through the twitching. Sleep deprivation among court jesters is a rarely discussed historical reality. In medieval Europe, jesters were often the last ones allowed to rest, expected to entertain nobles through long vigils, spiritual fasts, and midnight war councils. Historians still argue whether the tragic jester, Stultus of Lyon, who once bit a bishop mid-juggle, was mad from pressure or just really, really tired. The third jester on the plank now shouts, "Carpe noctem," and flings his sword straight into the fountain. The king claps. "Very symbolic," he says. "He has seized the night." The crowd murmurs sleepily. Somewhere behind you, someone tries to clap and accidentally drops their own wig. The harpist, back with vengeance, begins plucking a tune that sounds like falling downstairs. Meanwhile, the jester on the floor, the turnip juggler, suddenly pauses, looks around wide-eyed and blurts, "Am I real?" This prompts a wave of polite panic. Several courtiers begin touching their own faces to confirm they exist. A bishop pinches a baroness. She screams. Everyone applauds. The king, meanwhile, is absolutely enthralled. He hasn't laughed in weeks, and now he's cackling so hard he nearly falls off his hay-stuffed throne. "Brilliant," he wheezes. "Hysterical existential collapse. Such range." One of the jesters faints dramatically onto the plank, somehow managing to do a split mid-fall. A servant rushes in to measure the distance between his toes. It's now a new court record. You, however, can barely keep your head up. Your neck wobbles like uncooked pudding, and your brain feels stuffed with lukewarm porridge. You try pinching your arm, but even the pain feels tired. The lady next to you nods off, chin dipping into her goblet of melted goose cheese. A sleep marshal approaches her, raises his alarm clock scepter, and shouts, "Be gone, dreamer!" She jolts upright and offers her spoon in surrender. The king suddenly demands audience participation. Everyone must contribute one awakened riddle to the entertainment. Yours must involve a cat, a clock, and the concept of guilt. You panic and say, "Why did the cat refuse to nap?" "Because time judged him." There's silence, then wild applause. The king declares it profound. A scribe etches it onto a curtain. This earns you a temporary reprieve. No feather tax for 2 nights and permission to blink both eyes simultaneously. But the performance continues. The jesters are now performing interpretive dance routines meant to represent dreams they're not allowed to have. One writhes on the floor whispering, "Pillow, pillow," while waving a shoe. Another climbs into a barrel and sings, "Row, row, row your boat," in an aggressive falsetto. The Latin jester tries again. "Etromledum sulp, ecnet sex." You think he's saying, "Muldrotum pulse, existence." The king weeps with joy. "They speak the truth of the sleepless," he sobs. "Such poetry." Then one of them actually dozes off, just crumples like an underbaked cake. The music stops. The room stills. You could hear a feather drop, and somewhere, one probably does. The sleep marshal steps forward. All jesters freeze. The fallen one twitches in his sleep, murmuring something about soft towels. The marshal raises his scepter. The punishment: he is to be dressed as a sheep and used as a prop in tomorrow's nocturnal tax parade. A marching procession of nobles with empty blankets and fake beds to remind the people that dreams are a luxury they no longer deserve. But here's the twist. The punishment is considered an honor. To impersonate the dream state is the highest role available in the Royal Sleep Resistance Theater. You find yourself almost jealous. After all, he gets to pretend to sleep. The contest ends with an official proclamation. The court remains awake. The night remains untrusted. Long live the unrest. You're dismissed in silence, given a small bag of raisins. The king believes chewing them keeps you alert, and told to reflect deeply but not dreamily. As you shuffle toward your corridor, your shoes now filled with turnip peels, thanks, Jester number 2, you begin to wonder whether there's a single soul left in this castle who remembers what rest feels like, or if the entire kingdom has become a tragicomic ballet of collapsing bodies and deranged applause. You reach your hay pile, you sit, you look up. A jester's hat lies beside you, twitching slightly. You don't remember it being there before. You blink. It blinks back. You wake up, sort of, to the sound of someone banging on a sundial. Yes, a sundial. Indoors, at night, being struck repeatedly with what looks like a lute. The scene before you unfolds like a poorly rehearsed play. The royal astrologer, eyes wild with stardust and sleep deprivation, is in a heated argument with the master of timekeeping over whose celestial device is lying. The sundial reads moon, while the star chart claims dawn imminent. The king demands both to be true, and if they aren't, someone must be lying. Or possibly, time itself is rebelling. You are, unfortunately, standing directly in the blast zone of this scholarly meltdown. The chamberlain, who now wears an eye patch for aesthetic reasons, though no one remembers which eye he started with, accuses you of temporal sabotage. You were seen loitering near the Hourglass Conservatory, he hisses, and your shadow lingered suspiciously. You try to explain that you were merely delivering raisins to the sleep-deprived janitors, but it's no use. The king waves a scroll, half-chewed, and declares that all subjects shall be inspected for chronological irregularities. You're ordered to the Hall of Official Clocks. It's exactly as dreadful as it sounds. Rows and rows of timepieces, each one supposedly sacred, each telling a slightly different hour. Some tick backwards, one spins like a carousel, another doesn't tick at all, it just judges you with a soft hum. In the center stands the great royal clock, whose hands have been forcibly aligned to point at wide awake for 3 weeks straight. You're made to place your hand on a truth tick, a small bell with a twitchy pendulum, and answer questions about where you were, what you dreamed, and whether you've ever secretly wished for bedtime. The bell dings judgmentally after each question. You swear it's getting faster. Have you tampered with the gongs? No. Ding. Have you thought about napping in a sunbeam? Once. Ding, ding, ding. Do you own any suspiciously cozy socks? I might. Ding, 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 ding. You are now a person of interest. The chamberlain insists on a full inspection of your quarters. This includes measuring the fluff level of your pillow, suspiciously medium, checking for unauthorized timepieces. You forgot about the beetle-sized pocket watch your aunt gave you, and licking the air to detect the presence of twilight. He concludes that your dwelling is ambiguous in intent. This earns you a citation and an escort to the gallery of misaligned sundials, a long hallway filled with discarded timekeeping devices deemed philosophically non-compliant. You're told to contemplate your sins and align your soul's hour hand. Historically speaking, time disputes in royal courts were a very real source of tension. Louis XIII of France once banned public clocks from showing time, contrary to court bell towers. Historians still argue whether this was a matter of control or simply because his personal clock was always 10 minutes fast and he didn't want to be embarrassed. Back in the gallery, you're handed a brush and instructed to dust the future. This appears to be symbolic. You gently clean sundials engraved with nonsense words like moon o'clock and maybe-ish. Each one feels like a reminder that time is no longer about hours or minutes. It's about loyalty. Loyalty to the king's delusions of wakefulness. Loyalty to the idea that sleep is suspicious. That if you can't measure time, then maybe it won't pass. Maybe the dawn won't come and prove that he is, in fact, mortal. You're startled from your thoughts by the clang of an overturned hourglass. Sand spills onto the marble floor. A gasp spreads through the hallway like fire through dry hay. The chamberlain steps forward, furious. "Time leakage," he hisses. "Sabotage by erosion." You're accused again. "It leaked on your shift." He gestures to your sleeves. "Dust of dream," he whispers. "Guilty by granule." Before you can defend yourself, you're whisked off to the chrono trial room, which, true to theme, is shaped like a clock face with 12 wooden chairs and one very unstable gavel. The judge, known only as the pendulum, wears robes made of discarded calendars and speaks exclusively in future tense. "You will have been guilty," he declares. "You will have been sentenced to recalibration." This involves being strapped to a metronome and asked to breathe in sync with it for 3 hours while listening to the king recite bedtime poetry. "Soft as goat," he drones. "Still as stone. The feather floats. The eye won't close. You do your best not to fall asleep. One guard takes notes every time your eyelid twitches. Eventually, the recalibration ends with a declaration that you are moderately synchronized with sanctioned perception. You are given a sticker that reads, "I am wakeful." It doesn't peel well. As you are released, someone hands you a complimentary piece of toast. It's stale, but it has jam. You haven't tasted jam in weeks. You savor it, walking the long corridor back to your quarters, past the echoing tick-tick-tick of clocks that no longer agree with reality. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows. Someone yells at it for being temporally premature. It's promptly escorted to the whisper tribunal. You step into your room and close the door behind you, heart pounding from the trial, the clocks, the accusations of sock-based rebellion. And then you hear it, faintly behind your headboard, a ticking. You don't own a clock. You leap from the straw bed in a panic, overturning your entire haystack and upsetting a small family of mice who've recently joined your lease agreement. You press your ear to the wall. Yes, there it is. A slow, rhythmic ticking, faint but relentless. You check behind the tapestry. Nothing. You knock twice. The ticking pauses, then resumes. You are being watched by a wall. Before you can spiral too far into that thought, a scroll is shoved under your door with all the elegance of a goat kicking a letterbox. The wax seal bears the unmistakable symbol of the Royal Sob Choir, a single tear embroidered in gold. You groan audibly. You've been drafted. The Royal Sob Choir is a peculiar invention. formed during week 3 of the king's sleepless reign, when it became clear that music intended for sleep could not be heard by the king without risk of putting him in a dangerously restful state. So instead, the choir was assigned to perform lullabies not to the king, but toward his bedchamber wall. Yes, wall-facing lullabies. You trudge to their rehearsal chamber, where 30 sleep-deprived nobles stand in a half-circle, facing a mural of a yawning sheep painted over with angry red X's. Your choir director is a former bishop, now demoted and rebranded as the emotive volume master. His wig is askew, his baton is a celery stalk, and his shirt reads, "Sing softly or else." You're handed sheet music that's 90% res. The only lyrics are, "Hush the dust, hush the stone, soothe the wool, leave sleep alone." You're assigned to mild despair, which means your voice must sound like the gentle sobbing of someone who's just remembered a fond dream and realized they'll never experience it again. Lady Ethelwyn is on lingering ache. Lord Snorwell has been promoted to quiet yearning, which earns him a raised eyebrow and a slightly warmer gruel ration. The emotive volume master begins the rehearsal by spraying valerian root mist into the air, then panics and demands everyone hold their breath, lest the room become contaminated by subconscious longing. Half the choir faints anyway. You envy them. Now you begin. The melody is intentionally disjointed, too harmonious, and the king might drift off, which would undo all his efforts to stay defiantly awake. So you sing in a warbly whisper, voice cracking just slightly. "Hush the dust." The wall stares back at you. You suspect it's judging your phrasing. Sleep prevention rituals aren't just bizarre fantasy. In 17th century France, King Louis XIV insisted on elaborate bedtime routines where the court would observe him undressing, lying down, and being tucked in with multiple layers, only to rise again hours later if a letter arrived. Historians still argue whether these routines were a genuine comfort to the monarch or a calculated spectacle of power. Either way, they created generations of insomniac nobility, terrified of linen etiquette. Here, however, the ceremony is stranger still. You're instructed to sway, but not rhythmically. Your knees must bend with unpredictable emotional weight. A duchess in the front row begins weeping into her elbow. This is praised. You fake a sniffle. This is called performative grieving. The emotive volume master makes a note. Then comes the volume tribunal. This is a separate chamber where 3 robed figures sit at a long table, listening to recordings of the choir's whispers. You are called forward and asked to replicate your "hush the stone" line. You deliver it with cautious sadness. One tribunal member immediately stops you. "Your H was aggressive," she says, eyes narrowed. It struck the consonant like a door slammed in sorrow. You nod apologetically. You are asked to repeat the line with less intention and more remorse. You deliver it again. They nod. Better. Still, your sigh lacked wistfulness. You're dismissed with a parchment note reading volumetric compliance tentative. On your way out, you pass the wall, the bedchamber wall. You pause, daring to press your palm against it. It's warm, not from sunlight. There hasn't been a clear sky in weeks, but from sheer proximity to madness. You lean in. You think you hear breathing. Back in the hallway, you're accosted by a scribe who informs you that your sigh from 3 nights ago has been recorded as emotionally suspicious. You blink. "Which sigh?" you ask. He flips his scroll. Tuesday, approx. Hour 15, you were observed sighing toward a hallway mirror. The reflection lingered. You are now under volume surveillance. This means you must wear a ribbon that detects decibel changes. It tightens if your breath sounds content. If it senses longing, it vibrates softly to alert a marshal. You decide it's best not to exhale at all unless absolutely necessary. The pressure builds. You return to the choir for the evening performance. This time in the royal garden, facing the hedge. The king believes the hedge absorbs excess sleep vibrations. You sing. The hedge rustles ominously. Someone faints mid-hush. The choir doesn't stop. You step over them, whispering stone into the shrubbery like it's your only hope. Later that night, you're given a whisper waiver, a document confirming that your volume level remains below emotional breach threshold. It comes with a stale biscuit. As you lie in your hay pile, now mercifully free of jester hats, you stare at the ceiling. You try to breathe normally. You try not to sigh. But there it is again, that ticking behind the wall. And now it's whispering your name. Or maybe it's the wall, or maybe it's the reflection. You roll over, clutch the biscuit like it's a holy relic, and promise yourself this. Tomorrow you'll learn to hum with plausible deniability. The courtroom smells faintly of burnt milk and melted candle wax, which you're told is meant to encourage lucidity. But nothing about what's happening here feels particularly lucid. You're seated on a splintered bench carved into the shape of a sleeping cat, waiting to testify in a trial about dream crimes. Yes, dream crimes. This all began when your roommate, a scribe named Mortwill, started murmuring in his sleep. Innocent things at first. Cheese wheel, thimble of destiny. But then one night he shouted, "Down with the sleepless tyrant," and accidentally kicked over a chamber pot. Unfortunately, the court astrologer was on a nearby balcony, recording nightly omens, and heard everything. Now Mortwill is shackled, bleary-eyed, and accused of treasonous, subconscious activity. The court calls it somnic rebellion. You are listed as a witness because you once borrowed Mortwill's blanket and therefore may have contaminated his dreamscape. The judge for this case is Lord Twilligan, a man who hasn't slept since the first insomnia decree and now wears two monocles stacked atop each other. He insists on being called the Waker. His gavel is a dried zucchini. "Bring forth the dream logs," he declares, and a servant wheels out a scroll so long it drags behind like a defeated tail. Each entry details snippets of muttered phrases, sleep snores logged as potential Morse code, and dream grunts analyzed by the Ministry of Subconscious Intent. You glance nervously at your own file. There's a quote recorded from 2 nights ago. "Socks don't belong in soup. They've flagged it under anti-culinary extremism." You make a mental note never to dream again. The trial begins in earnest. Mortwill pleads not guilty. He insists he had no control over the dream, and besides, the tyrant in his sleep had 8 arms and a duck's beak, which doesn't match the king's description precisely. The prosecution counters that symbolic treason is still treason, and that duck beak metaphors have long been associated with rebellion in court poetry. One of the more disturbing traditions in this era of sleepless monarchy is the creation of dream transcripts, court records of what people are believed to have dreamed. It's a blend of guesswork, surveillance, and bad improv. Historians still argue whether the so-called dream registry of Queen Ulrich's court in the 16th century was ever real, but several diaries reference nobles being interrogated for muttering in their sleep. One letter even mentions a man exiled for dreaming about chairs because the queen was reportedly terrified of furniture. Here in this twilight realm of logic, the evidence continues. An embroidered pillowcase found beneath Mortwill's bed, depicting a serene lake. They call it dream propaganda. His defense argues it's just embroidery. The prosecutor slams down a tiny pillow filled with barley and hisses, "Intent to nap. You're called to the stand. You swear an oath over a sleeping tortoise. You're asked if you've ever seen Mortwill visibly dream. You say he sometimes twitches. Once he sneezed while smiling. Gasps echo. The court artist faints. Then comes the worst question. And have you had any suspicious dreams? You consider lying, but the tortoise blinks at you, judgingly. I once dreamed I was eating soup with my hands. Dead silence, then murmurs. You're marked for secondary review. Mortwill is found guilty of subconscious betrayal with intent to inspire sedition. His sentence, 1 week of forced lucid dreaming, administered by the royal wakewalker, a man who dances in place while describing vivid scenarios in the voice of a foghorn. He's escorted out, dazed and gently humming the national anthem in reverse. As you exit the courtroom, a small child hands you a flyer. Know your night mind. 10 signs you're dreaming illegally. It includes tips like, don't picture pillows without clearance, and avoid visualizing softness in quantities greater than 2. You pass a corkboard lined with citizen dream maps, complete with arrows and annotations. One reads, possible treason near the second goose. Another is simply a crude drawing of a bed, with red X's over it. Back in your chamber, you stare at your own blanket. It's now been stitched with a warning label. This item may incite rest. You're terrified to touch it. You use your boots instead. You lie on the floor, wrapped in the sound of old floorboards and your own increasingly erratic heartbeat. You try not to think, not to imagine, but your thoughts drift, just for a moment, towards soup and socks. A bell rings outside. It's the Dream Patrol. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to disappear. The smell hits you first, burnt cinnamon, old leather, and something distinctly roasted. Not food, though. Coffee beans. You freeze. You know the consequences. Smelling like caffeine in this kingdom is only slightly less dangerous than declaring a pillow monarchy. The royal prohibition against coffee was issued in what historians now refer to as the Second Yawn Crisis. The king, having stayed awake for 11 straight days, blamed his inability to dream on a cursed cup of mocha brought to court by an ambassador from the East. He banned it immediately, no exceptions. No grounds for appeal, pun very much not intended, lest you be flogged for caffeinated humor. You slowly turn the corner and spot it. A laundry maid, small, sharp-eyed, smelling faintly of nutmeg, stands beside a half-open hatch in the castle's lower kitchens. She glances both ways, then gestures for you to follow. You hesitate. She hisses, bean side or dream side? Your choice is made. You duck through the hatch. Welcome to the Espresso Speakeasy. It's dark, it's damp, and it's full of people you recognize from various tribunal hearings. A baron, 2 jesters, a guy you were fairly certain turned into a chair last week. They all look twitchy, but focused. At the far end of the room stands an old wash tub repurposed as a brewing station. A squire pumps a bellows to keep a tiny flame alive under a copper kettle. Another slowly grinds roasted beans using a wheel once attached to a torture device. Ironic, considering how close to bliss these folks look. You're handed a small cup. It's warm, bitter, glorious. It tastes like rebellion and poor decisions. You down it in one gulp. Suddenly, the world feels brighter, sharper. The cracked tiles beneath your feet seem to hum with intent. Someone plays a lute that sounds vaguely like a heartbeat, or maybe that's your actual heartbeat. It's hard to tell. A nobleman nearby mutters, "I remember color again." Someone else weeps into their espresso. Of course, this is all highly illegal. A century ago, similar panic swirled around caffeine in parts of the Islamic world, where some religious leaders feared that coffee houses were hotbeds of sedition. Historians still argue whether the bans were more about the stimulating properties of the drink or the tendency of caffeinated citizens to talk politics deep into the night. In this castle, the fear is more primal. The king sees coffee as the ultimate betrayal, a way to survive sleeplessness without falling apart. He hates it not because it keeps you up, but because it gives you power over the exhaustion that defines him. And if you have that power, what else might you resist? You're warned not to ask names here. Drink and forget, says the laundry maid. Loose lips brew busts. But someone does ask. A young footman, a little too giddy from his first macchiato, says aloud, "Does the king know?" The room goes dead quiet. Someone extinguishes the lantern. You're shoved into a pile of towels, the password changes, the exit shifts. You crawl out into the hallway, dazed and buzzing. You try to walk slowly, calmly, but your feet want to jog. Your eyes dart around. You hum a little. This, as it turns out, is a problem. A sleep marshal corners you 2 corridors later. "Excessive pep," he growls. "Brightness of eye. Gait suspiciously buoyant." He taps your forehead with his scepter. "You've been beaned." You deny everything. He narrows his eyes. "Say soothing." You do. But your soothing sounds like an exclamation point in a teacup. He squints harder. "Say yawn." You try. It comes out, "yin," with what you now realize was a little too much gusto. He writes a citation, "Suspected caffeinic uplift." This means you must now undergo deceleration therapy. You're escorted to a room filled with droning monks who chant the word mellow in a slowly descending key. You are seated on a chair made of wet felt and handed a bowl of warm rice water. The process is excruciating. Your limbs want to move. Your fingers twitch in Morse code. Your brain is writing poetry about socks and lanterns. But you must sit and sip and sway softly. Eventually, you are judged to be less caffeinated than feared, but still suspiciously vibrant. You're released under watch and instructed to go home, think neutral thoughts, and report any dreams involving steam. You return to your corridor, still jittery. The walls seem to pulse. You're not sure if it's the coffee or the trauma. The mice give you side-eye. The ticking behind the wall has changed tempo. That night, you lie wide-eyed, thinking of the speakeasy, of the heat in your hands, of the wild humming clarity. And you wonder, what if the king just had a sip? What if we all did? You awake, barely, to the sensation of someone gently sniffing your pillow. You crack an eye. It's not a person, it's an official. Feather hat, monocle on a stick, clipboard in hand. Beside him stands a goose. The goose also appears to be sniffing, with evident judgment. "Just conducting a random feather inspection," the man says in a voice that implies he enjoys his job far too much. "Quite routine. Standard under the new pillow tax reform." You groan. The pillow tax, as it turns out, is one of the more controversial laws introduced during what courtiers now call the chrono deprivation epoch. According to the new decree, every citizen must contribute down feathers weekly as part of the kingdom's war on comfort. Any bedding too soft, too stuffed, or too smug in its fluffiness is subject to immediate confiscation and public restuffing. Your pillow, unfortunately, is a criminal. The official pokes it, watches how slowly it rebounds, and raises an eyebrow. "That's not a goose," he says. "That's premium goose, possibly illicit swan." You protest. "I got it from the barracks, secondhand." The goose honks with finality. That's all it takes. A parchment citation is slapped onto your wall: suspected pillow fraud and down smuggling. You're fined 12 feathers and escorted to the Ministry of Sleep Implements for redistribution protocol. This essentially means you'll be issued a state-approved bedding apparatus, which looks like a half-deflated turnip sewn into a sock. You carry it home ashamed. Feather taxes might seem absurd, but they're not entirely fictional. In 18th century Prussia, there were regulations surrounding who could own what kind of bedding, often as class markers. Some scholars believe that control over sleep comfort was part of broader authoritarian strategies, because well-rested citizens have enough energy to rebel. Historians still argue whether certain edicts restricting mattress material were economic measures or psychological warfare disguised as hygiene. Here, though, it's all part of the king's unhinged crusade against rest. You pass other citizens dragging flattened pillows behind them like defeated pets. Someone cries softly over a confiscated quilt. A tailor tries to sew decoy feathers made of dried spinach. He is publicly applauded for innovation and then arrested. Back in your room, you open your tiny bedding locker. It's been raided. Gone are your comfort socks, your softest scarf, even the knitted tea cozy your aunt smuggled in during the last festival of softness. All that remains is a small note that reads, "Resilience through rigidity." You sigh, but catch yourself. The sigh monitor ribbon on your arm tightens. You cough instead, but it sounds wistful. You stop breathing for a moment just to be safe. A knock on their door, you jump. This time, it's the Royal Down reallocation agent. He carries a bag of confiscated feathers and offers you a replacement bundle, which consists of coarse straw, a handful of lint, and 3 pigeon feathers bound with thread. You thank him. He nods solemnly, hands you a pamphlet titled "Appreciating Hard Sleep," and disappears. That night, your sleep is more like a nap you borrow under duress. You lie on your assigned pile, hugging your pillow turnip. It smells faintly of cabbage and regret. Your neck bends in strange directions. You dream, not vividly but almost rebelliously, of a bed so soft it hums lullabies and glows with ambient warmth. You wake up to a loud thwack at your door. "Routine stuffing inspection," a voice cries. "All cushions are to be unstuffed and declared innocent or fluffed with intent." You open the door to 3 new officials with a wooden pole, a funnel, and a suspiciously large squirrel. You ask tiredly what the squirrel is for. They don't answer. The inspection proceeds. Your pillow is dissected. The lint is weighed. The feathers are sniffed again by a different goose. This one wears boots. The boots squeak. You're declared within tolerable range of hardness, but are issued a warning. Your comfort proximity remains elevated. You're placed on a list. You don't ask which one. Later that afternoon, a messenger delivers your new down quota. 3 feathers per fortnight must be declared, displayed, and rotated weekly to avoid suspicion of hoarding. You ask where you're supposed to get them. He shrugs. Try the geese pond. Mind the signs. You do try. The geese do not like you. Eventually, you meet a man behind the bakery who offers to sell you morally gray duck down. He opens his coat and reveals a selection of baggies filled with off-white fluff. No questions, he says. No refunds. You decline, for now. But that night, as your spine sinks into your burlap sack and your head rolls against the itchy sock turnip, you think about it. You think about the quiet rebellion of feathers, about softness and comfort, and what it means to resist a kingdom built on exhaustion. You also think you saw the goose with boots wink at you. But maybe that was the dream creeping in again. You are summoned at dawn, which of course no longer means anything to the courtyard where the king is preparing to nap. This is unusual. His Majesty, famed for his sleepless tirades, has recently adopted public napping as a gesture of power. If I choose to rest, he proclaimed last week while draped over a cello, it shall be theatrical and under full surveillance. My REM cycle shall inspire loyalty. You are part of the security team for today's nap. You arrive to find a strange scene. A small wooden platform has been erected in the middle of the square, covered in damp velvet and surrounded by 17 elaborately dressed mannequins. These are the body doubles. Each is made to look like the king, complete with papier-mâché crowns and red-rimmed fake eyes. Decoys, a scribe whispers, to confuse nightmares. Your job is to stand beside one and prevent it from being tackled. It seems the king no longer trusts dreams. He believes that if he dozes, even briefly, assassins will strike, not from outside the kingdom, but from within his subconscious. The mannequins are there to draw fire from enemy thoughts. And from time to time, a dream-inspired courtier does attack one, mistaking it for an intrusive sleep wraith. This is now considered a noble act of defense. Today's nap theater begins with a ceremonial tossing of goose feathers, followed by the playing of the kingdom's official bedtime march. The glorious decline. You stand at your post, staring at your assigned mannequin, which is slumped slightly and smells of glue. A bell rings. The king arrives. He wears silk pajamas over his armor and is carried on a bed of roasted beets. He waves solemnly to the gathered court. I shall attempt to nap, he announces, but remain spiritually upright. He reclines onto the central cot. A hush falls. The wind blows. Nothing happens. Minutes pass. His eyelids flutter. The crowd holds its breath. Someone coughs. A guard faints. A pigeon lands on one of the mannequins. The king jerks awake. He points at the pigeon. Infiltrator! Chaos erupts. Guards chase the pigeon. One mannequin collapses under its own wig. A noble lunges at another decoy, shouting, Nightmare! Nightmare! You hold your position, but your mannequin starts tilting, whispering in a voice suspiciously like yours. Let me sleep, it says. Just one blink. You shove it upright, it weeps sawdust. The king, now fully awake, declares the nap partially compromised but spiritually informative. He names the bird Sir Betrayal and orders it knighted and exiled in the same breath. Historically, public sleeping by monarchs was rare, but not unheard of. The Ming emperors were said to conduct dream consultations in public gardens, claiming visions arrived more clearly under the sky. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were genuine or stage-managed mysticism designed to awe the court. Either way, dreams were often interpreted like scrolls, dangerous, sacred, and subject to editing. Back in the courtyard, cleanup begins. The mannequins are carted off. One is bleeding what looks like marmalade. A sleep marshal accidentally arrests a hat. You are dismissed with a scroll labeled Nap Security Clearance Level Y, Wakeful Watcher. You go to the feast hall to recover. Someone's left a bowl of fennel water and a single boiled almond. You sit. The almond is hard. The water tastes like licorice anxiety. A baroness next to you whispers, "They say the king hasn't truly slept since the Dream Rebellion." You nod. "Which one?" She shrugs. "The one with the chickens and the mirror." This clarifies nothing. Later that night, as you return to your quarters, you find something troubling. One of the mannequins is sitting on your bed. You freeze. It's yours. The one you stood beside. You'd recognize that crooked tilt, that smudge of glue tear just under the left eye. Someone has placed it here deliberately. It holds a note in its straw-stuffed hand. "You dream too often. This is your warning nap. Don't become your double." You consider reporting it, but who would believe you? Instead, you drag the mannequin into the hallway and gently tip it over. It lands with a muffled thud. You whisper, "Sorry," and walk away. Back in your hay pile, you try to sleep. But now you wonder, if your double naps in your place, do you dream what it dreams? The ticking behind your wall has stopped. You're not sure that's a good sign. You wake to silence, which in this castle is never good. No footsteps, no lute solos, no whisper rehearsals. Not even the usual distant scream of a man who's remembered his dreams and regrets it. Just silence. You open your door and step into the corridor. The torches are out, the candles gone. You turn left. More darkness. Right, same. Something's different. You feel it in your ribs. The castle has stopped. You creep forward, guided only by the moonlight leaking through a cracked, stained glass window shaped like a yawn. And then you find it, the Hall of Clocks. Only it's dead. This corridor is supposed to pulse, hum, tick. It's the heartbeat of the entire court's sleep resistance. A row of timepieces, big and small, mechanical and magical, ticking their way toward eternal wakefulness. But now, silence. The grandfather clocks have frozen, their pendulums dangling like tired tongues. The sundials, yes, there are indoor sundials, point nowhere. A cuckoo bird hangs halfway out of its door, frozen in mid-coo. You take a cautious step inside. The walls are lined with velvet and mirrors. You can see your reflection, eyes bloodshot, hair a haystack, one slipper missing. You look exactly like the kind of person a court would put in charge of keeping the king awake. But there's no one else here. You wander past the royal insomnia meter, a towering device with 20 spinning gears and a tube of glowing sand. It usually hums, spins, and occasionally shouts things like, "No naps detected." Now, nothing. Its face has cracked. The sand has stopped mid-trickle. You hear a soft noise, a chime. You turn. A tiny table clock flickers. Its minute hand twitches once, twice, then stops. You take another step, and your own pocket watch explodes. Okay, not literally, but it bursts open, springs fly, the glass cracks. The tiny second hand skitters across the marble floor like a beetle looking for cover. And now you're panicking. Because there's a law, several in fact, that state tampering with temporal order is considered high treason. And standing in a room full of broken clocks when time itself seems to have shut down, that's not a good look. You rush to the far end of the corridor where the master clock lives. Or rather, lived. The great central timepiece, shaped like a sleepless eye, used to glow with gold and hum like a satisfied cat. Now its hands hang limp, both pointing downward in resignation. Beneath it, a plaque reads, "So long as this clock ticks, so ticks the realm." You whisper, "Oh no," because that clock is definitely not ticking. This room is cursed now. You know it. Or at least the king will think it is. And if the king thinks time has stopped, he'll assume someone has stolen it. You're about to flee when you hear footsteps behind you. Slow, creaking. You turn. It's the king. Alone, robeless, pale, eyelids drooping just slightly. His crown is missing. His hair looks like a goose nested in it. He stares at the clocks, and he begins to laugh. Low at first, then louder. It echoes off the glass. "They've surrendered," he says. "Time has fled. It was afraid." He walks over to the master clock and touches its frozen face. "I win," he whispers. He turns to you. "Don't you see? This was the final opponent. Sleep was never the enemy. Time was, and now it has stopped." You try to speak. "Your Majesty." "No," he says, holding up a hand. "Let it be known. The clocks are done. The march of hours ends here. No more ticking, no more counting, no more minutes to wait. From this moment forward, the only measure is wakefulness itself." He pauses, then adds, "Also my blanket's missing, but that's unrelated." You nod, because that's what one does. The king walks out of the Hall of Clocks, humming tunelessly. You are left alone with frozen pendulums, glassy stares, and that unsettling silence. Historians still argue whether the infamous time collapse at King Thurel's court was due to mechanical failure, magical sabotage, or just the sheer weight of collective madness. Some scholars believe it marked the true beginning of the empire's decline, when the people no longer measured days but moments between collapses. Others argue it was performance art, because of course they do. You tiptoe past the fallen cuckoo and make your way back to your quarters. As you walk, you notice something strange. The castle feels slower, or maybe you do. The walls seem thicker, the corridors longer, like everything's stuck in a moment it doesn't want to end. You pass a window, the moon is unmoving. You breathe carefully. You reach your hay pile, lie down, stare at the ceiling. There is no ticking, no chimes, no bells. And for the first time since arriving in this court, your eyes start to close on their own. Just a little. But before you can drift, a scream. The clocks, someone cries. They've gone to sleep. You bolt upright, heart pounding, straw stuck to your cheek, your sleep ribbon halfway strangling your neck. The scream is still echoing through the corridors. You tumble out of your hay, fling open your door, and stumble into a hallway swarming with whisperers. Not people whispering, actual whisperers. The court's most unnerving enforcers, robed in gray felt, their faces veiled with mesh, moving in absolute silence. Each carries a small parchment scroll and an impossibly large feather pen. Their job? To monitor decibels of intention. And tonight they've called an emergency meeting. You are summoned. You try to protest. "I didn't scream, I swear." A whisperer holds up a scroll. On it, in elegant looping script, you exhaled too loudly near a reflective surface. Your stomach drops. You remember the mirror in the corridor, that moment of relief when the clocks had stopped, that one deep sigh. It's been reported. You are escorted to the volume tribunal. This room is shaped like an ear. Everything echoes. Every step, every breath, Every heartbeat feels like a drum solo. You're told to sit in the center. The whisperers circle you, rustling like suspicious drapery. The tribunal begins with a whisper count. One of the judges, Lord Susurrus, leans forward and asks, "Do you know why you're here?" You reply, "No." Three of them flinch. One drops a teacup. A feather quill spontaneously combusts. Lord Susurrus gestures to a massive conch shell mounted on the wall. "This artifact recorded your exhale. We will now play it." You wait, and then the sound fills the chamber like waves crashing through a library. It lasts 12 full seconds. When it ends, the silence is damning. "Intentional," says one judge. "Evocative," says another. "Practically romantic," whispers a third. "It conjured images." You're given a citation, sighing with thematic undertones. You try to explain. "It was just a relief. The clock stopped. It felt like something changed." More quills snap. A whisperer faints. You're immediately assigned a new trial. Emotional suggestion via ambient breathwork. This time, your defense is led by a man who only communicates through throat clearing. He presents an argument composed entirely of coughs, sniffs, and one strategic hiccup. It's oddly convincing. Still, you're found audibly dangerous. Your sentence, whisper conditioning. You are fitted with the whisper collar, a delicate glass neckpiece filled with purple sand. If your voice rises above dream-level murmur, the sand glows and begins playing a music box tune called "Oops Too Loud." You are released into monitored probation. For the next 48 hours, you must speak exclusively in metaphor. Example, instead of "I'm cold," you say, "Winter stands too near." Instead of "I'm hungry," you whisper, "The cupboard echoes with longing." Instead of "Help, my foot is on fire," you must gently coo, "My toes dance with regret." Naturally, people start avoiding you. This isn't new. Whisper laws were rare, but not entirely unheard of in the more paranoid periods of monarchic control. During the 16th century, English courts imposed restrictions on malicious murmuring, banning citizens from speaking ill of royalty, even in private. Historians still argue whether this led to a genuine decline in gossip or merely more creative forms of symbolic complaint. One man reportedly carved an insult into a turnip and tossed it into the Thames. Back in your reality, whisper patrols now roam the halls with feathered hats and sound meters. You see a noblewoman get cited for sneezing with implied sarcasm. A steward is reprimanded for clapping with emotional rhythm. You are asked to report a fellow courtier who sounded dreamy. You don't, but you do start avoiding reflective surfaces, just in case. On your second day of probation, you're summoned for speech audit review. You must read aloud from a pre-approved scroll titled, "Acceptable Murmurings of the Dutiful Courtier." Lines include, "O pillowless dawn, I cherish your stern mercy. Featherless though I lie, my spine sings praises. Softness is the enemy. Silence is my lullaby." You recite each line while judges nod grimly. You try not to choke on the absurdity. Your collar glows only once, when you accidentally smile during a metaphor about darkness. You are fined a sigh. Literally, a breath must be donated to the whisper bank, a crystal jar in the chapel where condemned exhales are stored and labeled. You submit your sigh. It's collected by a masked monk with tongs. The day ends with a final check-in at the tribunal hall. You line up with other sigh offenders. A boy who coughed a love poem, a cook who hummed a forbidden lullaby, an old man who snored too enthusiastically. As you shuffle home, You pass a guard standing on a pillow, yelling at it for being emotionally manipulative. You pass a group of whisperers practicing silent applause. You pass a painting of the king with the caption, "Even my breath belongs to the crown." You reach your room. You exhale slowly, silently. Your sand collar doesn't glow. You lie down. You whisper nothing. And the silence is not comforting. It is loud with judgment. You wake up to a root in your mouth. Not metaphorically, a literal valerian root, slightly chewed, wedged between your lips like some grim herbal pacifier. You sit up coughing, spitting plant fragments onto your straw. A figure looms at the foot of your bed. She is swaddled in shawls, her hair streaked with moss, and she holds a lantern filled with what looks like glowing chamomile petals. This is the melatonin oracle. You know this because she introduced herself with a slow hiss. "I am the melatonin oracle." And then she fell asleep standing up. You wave gently. She startles awake. "A prophecy," she mumbles, blinking like a mole. "One that arrived on the back of a sheep-shaped dream." You're not sure if that's poetic or just the Valerian talking. The oracle draws a dusty scroll from a pouch made of stitched eye masks. She unrolls it dramatically and then sneezes into it. You both wait to see what happens. "Your dream threshold," she says, squinting at nothing, "is dangerously high. You teeter on the cusp of a full night's rest. That cannot be allowed." You groan. "I haven't slept since the candle ban." She ignores you, instead pulling out a bowl of something steaming and gray. "Drink the forgetting porridge," she commands. "It will loosen your wakefulness." You ask what's in it. She blinks. "Mostly regret, some oats." You decline. She shrugs and eats it herself. After breakfast or prophecy, she hands you a small vial. "This is emergency drowsing. You must not drink it. Unless..." She leans closer and you realize her breath smells like lavender gone sour. "Unless the whisperers forget your name." The clocks spin backward and you find yourself surrounded by feathers. Then, and only then, may you seek the tribute. "The tribute?" "An uninterrupted bedtime story," she whispers. "A full one, with conflict and resolution, without interruption, without commentary." You shiver. The idea alone feels illegal. She stumbles toward the door. "Soon," she says, "you'll be tested." And she vanishes into the corridor, leaving a trail of crushed valerian petals and a faint scent of guilt. You clutch the vial and look down at the scroll she left behind. It contains one phrase scribbled in erratic script. "The softest moment births the loudest punishment." You pin it to your wall next to your citation for sighing with literary subtext. Later that day, you are summoned to the Ministry of Prophetic Compliance. There, in a chamber full of smoke and sleepy chanting, you're asked to recite your latest dream fragments. You invent one involving socks and fog. It's marked low threat. You're released with a valerian mint and told to walk slowly for several hours. As you wander, the castle seems dimmer, not darker, just tired. The torchlight flickers uncertainly. Walls slump slightly. A statue of a former king appears to be drooling. And then you hear it. A lullaby. Faint, beautiful, real. You follow the sound. It leads you to the lower halls. Past the kitchen where someone is boiling lettuce again. Past the tapestry of the last nap. And down into a narrow passage where light comes in through cracks in the stone. The melatonin oracle is there. She sits in the center of a circle of sleeping children. You blink. Children? Where did they come from? She puts a finger to her lips. "They are the dream bearers," she whispers, "smuggled in from distant villages. Their dreams are unregistered, wild, powerful. You ask why the court allows them here. She smirks. They don't know. They think I'm just a moldy librarian. She gestures to a boy with golden curls. He snores softly, then smiles mid-dream. That, she says, is the sound of rebellion. You sit, and for one moment, for one sacred, illegal moment, you listen. A story unfolds from the oracle's lips, soft and slow. A tale about a village where pillows bloom from trees and yawns are used as currency. She never raises her voice. She never hurries. You feel your eyes grow heavy. You try to resist. But something inside you, the last kernel of sanity, tells you it's okay. You are not in the king's chambers, not under a ticking clock, not whispers surveilled or monitored by scribes. Just here. And that's when it happens. Your head tilts, your breath slows, and you fall asleep. Fully, completely. No interruptions, no marching citations or mannequins. Just soft story thread curling around your thoughts, cradling your bones, until a trumpet blares. You jolt awake. Guards storm the hallway. Unauthorized narrative transmission, someone shouts. The oracle is in breach. Children scatter. The melatonin oracle is already gone. A boot print made of lavender dust is all that remains. You're dragged to your feet. Your dream was recorded by the wall. You are officially charged with tribute evasion, which means you owe the king a bedtime story, a perfect, complete one. No pressure, they give you a day to prepare. One single day to craft the tribute. The king's first complete bedtime story since he outlawed sleep. Not a song, not a whisper. A story with characters, conflict, arc, and resolution. It must be relaxing but not dull, soothing but not sleepy, imaginative but not rebellious. You are doomed. The guidelines are inscribed on parchment the size of a rug and delivered by a team of scribes who linger just long enough to judge your breathing pattern. The rules include phrases like, avoid metaphors involving clouds unless the clouds feel threatened. Do not personify sleep. It enrages His Majesty. All endings must suggest permanent wakefulness or else polite uncertainty. You spend the first 6 hours curled under your desk, panicking into your elbows. The last person tasked with a tribute failed in the middle of Act 2 and was banished to the forgotten nap room, a windowless cell lined with ticking metronomes and poetry written by the king during his 4th week of insomnia. The punishment is effective. You brainstorm. A tale of a fox who learns to embrace awareness? No, too sly. A heroic yawn that saves a village? Banned under the Auditory Suggestion Act, a goose detective solving crimes at a pillow factory? Maybe, but risky. In the end, you choose the only option that feels safe, a parable about a man who cannot sleep because he is just too valuable to the world. It's flattering, vague, and sufficiently exhausting in tone. You practice in front of your cracked mirror. You mumble, "Once there was a watchman named Wakely," and your mirror immediately fogs up, possibly with disappointment. The next evening, you are escorted to the king's personal chamber. It is dimly lit by bioluminescent fungus and one shivering candle. Thick curtains surround the bed, no longer red, but beige and aggressively neutral. You're made to sit on a cushion of firm beet husks. The king reclines on a cot shaped like a decision he regrets. He looks tired. Not angry, not manic. Just deeply, hauntingly tired. He raises a pale hand. Begin. You swallow. You take a breath. Not too deep, lest the sigh ribbon activate. And you begin. Once there was a man named Wakely who lived in a village where the stars never blinked. You speak slowly, each word measured, each sentence tiptoeing between meaning and nonsense. You build a world where Wakely is beloved, consulted by owls and entrusted with the sunrise. He is always needed, always watched, always useful. So useful, in fact, that he must never rest because his thoughts hold the fabric of the world together. The king stares at you with an intensity usually reserved for outlawed quilts. You continue. Wakely meets a mirror that offers him dreams, but he refuses, for fear they dilute his clarity. He walks through a forest where every tree whispers lullabies, but he wears earplugs. Eventually, Wakely finds a cave filled with people who've fallen asleep mid-task. He blesses them and moves on. At the climax, Wakely is offered a bed made of cloud and silence. He declines. He sits on a rock. He listens to the wind, and he simply stays awake, knowing that the world still turns, even when no one notices. You finish. Silence. The king does not clap, he does not blink. But he nods, once, then twice, then finally his eyelids tremble. His breathing slows. A murmur escapes his throat. Valiant. Wakely. And he sleeps. It is the most terrifying thing you have ever seen. The guards behind you draw in sharp breaths. One drops a lantern, another kneels. A courtier faints into a jar of lavender. You have lulled the king into unconsciousness. And now? Now they must act. A flurry of activity bursts around you. Silence banners are unfurled. Floorboards are wrapped in soft moss. The clocks are silenced with velvet. Even the mice are muzzled. The royal sleep protocol, last used during the century nap of Queen Cressida, is activated. This includes, all subjects must walk with knees slightly bent to avoid floor creaks. Coughing is only permitted into buckets of oat milk. Yawning is banned unless choreographed with approval scrolls. You are whisked from the chamber and placed in a glass cube marked, "Successful storyteller, do not disturb." A scribe interviews you from 5 feet away using hand signals and eyebrow flicks. You are given a biscuit shaped like Wakely's face. The next morning, or what passes for it, the kingdom is transformed. People tiptoe through breakfast. No horns, no trials, no whisperers. The king sleeps on. Hours pass. Days, maybe. Time has lost meaning again. You are declared hero of the stillness. They paint your portrait on the wall of the nocturnal chapel between Lady Hush and the silent goat. It's a bit off in the nose, but flattering in the eyes. But not all are pleased. You receive an anonymous note slipped under your door. You bent the rules. You told a story with closure. You gave him hope. That's dangerous. It's unsigned. You burn it. Then on the 4th night of the king's slumber, something stirs. You feel it in your hay, in the silence behind your wall. The ticking, long absent, returns. Only now it ticks backward, and you remember the oracle's words. If the clocks spin backward, the tribute was too strong. You clutch the vial she gave you, emergency drowsing, untouched. For now, the ticking is louder now. Not just behind your wall, but everywhere. You wake to the sound of gears grinding in the fireplace, a soft clicking from the floorboards, a grandfather clock that definitely wasn't in your room yesterday. It stands in the corner now, looming. Its hands spin the wrong way, slower than they should. And when you look at the face, your own reflection is yawning. But you aren't. The kingdom has slipped. The king still sleeps. On the 4th day of his slumber, ministers whisper that he might never wake. On the 5th, the sleep marshals burn their scepters, and begin humming lullabies in the courtyard. On the sixth, someone, no one knows who, scrawls across the throne room wall, "Let him dream. We'll do the rest." You hear whispers in every corridor now, and none of them belong to whisperers. The tribunal has vanished. The psi monitors have been removed. Even the goose with boots has retired to the garden. Somewhere a jester is teaching pigeons to recite bedtime stories. No one stops him. The kingdom is relaxing. But you feel the pressure building. The ticking grows louder. Time is leaking in reverse. People are beginning to report missing memories. Someone forgets their own name mid-curtsy. A steward serves breakfast at midnight, claiming it's still yesterday's lunch. One noble insists she already heard tomorrow's news, and it was tragic. And you're seeing things. Your hay pile has started rearranging itself. Last night you found your own handwriting on a pillow you didn't write on. It said, "Don't blink." The mannequin is back, standing, wearing your shoes. You begin to suspect that the bedtime story, the perfect bedtime story, might have been too perfect. The oracle was right. A tale with a beginning, middle, and end is rare, unstable. It created something in the king's mind that hadn't existed before. Peace, closure, sleep. And that peace is spreading like a velvet infection. The clocks resist it. They fight back. And now they fight you. Because you told the story. And that makes you a threat. You try to leave the castle. You pack a small bag, one hard biscuit, your whisper ribbon as a keepsake, and the vial, the emergency drowsing. You make it as far as the outer gate before a page stops you. "The king," she says, "is stirring." You hesitate. He murmured your name, so you return. The halls are quieter than ever, a stillness that pulses. Everyone you pass bows, not in reverence, but in shared exhaustion. You are led into the royal bedchamber by a steward whose eyes do not match. He opens the curtain. The king lies there, pale, yes, but breathing, peacefully. His lips move. You lean close. He whispers wakely, "Found the cave, I didn't leave." You don't know what to say. Then he opens his eyes. Just a sliver. Enough to see you. Enough to remember the story. "Did he ever sleep?" he asks. You consider your answer. "No," you whisper. But he stopped needing to. The king smiles and closes his eyes again. This time his breathing deepens. He falls back into sleep. Not like a collapse, but like a surrender. A gentle slide into somewhere softer. The candle dims. The ticking fades. You step back. Outside, the castle begins to yawn. Not literally, though, honestly, who can say anymore? The court slips into stillness. For the first time in recorded memory, the guards unlace their boots. A marshal curls up on a tapestry. Someone hands out tea. The law books are stacked neatly, unused. You return to your chamber. The ticking behind your wall is gone. The mannequin, gone too. You lie in your straw, stare at the ceiling, and for the first time since arriving, you don't listen for threats. You don't prepare for citations. You don't fear feathers. You rest. And you don't dream. Because tonight, finally, there's nothing left to resist. And now the castle dims. Even the most stubborn candelabra flickers into slumber. The once manic corridors stretch out quietly, their echoing steps replaced by the hush of deep, deliberate stillness. The air, once filled with rustling scrolls and distant shouting about blankets, settles into something soft. Something you might almost call peace. You lie back once more, arms resting gently at your sides, no longer clutching invisible worries or tick-tock dread. The walls don't breathe anymore. They just are. The windows don't watch you. They simply gaze out into the velvet dark. And that incessant ticking, that relentless mocking whisper of borrowed time, it's gone. Finally. Imagine that. Nothing chasing you. No whisperers scribbling judgment. No fear of a sigh too heavy or a laugh too honest. No feathers to count, no clocks to obey. Only the slow rhythm of your breath. And maybe, just maybe, the echo of a bedtime story still curling at the edges of your thoughts, safe and whole. The kingdom will wake, of course, it always does, but not yet, not for a while. Let it rest. Let you rest. Sink deeper into the straw or the pillow or whatever dream-soft place your mind builds in its stead. No more rules now. No more noise. Just hush and breath and stillness. You did enough. Sleep.